Attention startup leaders. Are you strapped for time but hungry for strategic insights? Introducing Managed Chaos, your go-to podcast for navigating the startup world in less time than your morning commute. Join us as we share expert advice, real-world examples, and actionable strategies to help you scale your business, allocate resources effectively, and achieve visionary results. Tune into Managed Chaos and join a community of like-minded innovators on the path to entrepreneurial success.
As a startup or small business leader, we know what it feels like to constantly be riding the roller coaster of chaos. It's hard to manage what's happening right now, let alone plan a way to get ahead of things. I mean, who has that endless to-do list? Welcome to the Managed Chaos podcast, where we give you the startup business rundown in less time than it takes for you to get to work. I'm Katrina Purcell.
And I'm Rachel Anderson.
And today we're going to help you get off the roller coaster of chaos. But the roller coaster can be fun. Anyway, all right.
You know what? Let's start there. Sometimes the roller coaster of chaos is in fact fun, but only for very short periods of time, 3 minutes tops.
Yeah, well, let's talk first. Like, what is the roller coaster of chaos? It's not a real roller coaster, but...
That's right. So the roller coaster of chaos is really just all the things that happen in your business that you feel like it just takes off without you, right? You're a passenger, you're not in control, it's ups and downs, it spins around, it's upside down. Like it's just honestly the course of doing business. And when you're small and scrappy, it feels like there's just never a moment where you're really in control. And there are certain things that happen in business that make it worse. And so really, it's just sort of all a roller coaster of chaos.
I really love that. I think, again, when you sign up for the roller coaster, have you ever been on one of those roller coasters where it's like in the dark and you don't actually see what's going to happen before you get on the roller coaster? So you're kind of unsure. And I think of it as one of those types of roller coasters. So you're not seeing it. You don't see the loops and everything. It's sort of like, I think at Disney World, it's the Aerosmith ride, right? Where it's pitch black and you don't know. You're like, am I going to go upside down? Maybe I'm not. Maybe I will. And so I think it's such a great analogy for us to use. But what steps can leaders take if they've decided that they don't want to be on the roller coaster anymore, right? Because doesn't someone have to actually run the roller coaster, even if everyone else feels like they're on it?
Okay, so that is a great question. Yes, someone has to be running and operating that roller coaster. And so what do you do to take back control of the actual roller coaster, get off the roller coaster? So for a lot of leaders and smaller businesses, there are some practical steps you can really take to try and step off. So first is that, you really want to assess and prioritize what's going on. Not everything is actually an emergency. Sometimes we think that things are an emergency because they're important to us or because we haven't asked the right questions about timeline and scope to really understand that we can push things out. But as a leader, you can have that eagle eye view and you can help other people really determine what that looks like. You also can make sure that when you delegate, you're doing so effectively. Brené Brown is she's a researcher. She's done a lot of research on different ways that organizations can come together through workplace and leadership and shame and vulnerability, which are sort of her things. But she talks about how she likes to ask the question, what does done look like? Mm-hmm. And so as a leader, as you start to try and delegate to get off this roller coaster, you shouldn't just say, hey, I need you to take over this entire project. You need to be really specific about the things that it looks like once it's done so that when you hand that off, you don't have to go back and redo it or be frustrated that now you're back on the project or that you're not kind of finishing and moving forward. Some of the other things is to implement scalable processes. And this is one of my favorite things. It's one of the things I do in my business. But, to have a scalable process does take time. It takes a decision to really take a breath and wait a moment and know that things around you are going to be on fire while you get that in process or kind of the process in place. But it really does have far-reaching effects to slow down what's happening and actually help you start overcoming the different things. Another one is to set clear communication channels. So how are you going to make sure that things get communicated clearly? Is it Slack? Is it emails? Is it weekly meetings? Are the right people who need to collaborate on something talking to each other? That's really important. And then finally is track and measure progress. If you cannot measure what's happening, then you can't effectively, and sometimes at all, figure out what things need to stop or start in order to get off the chaos train.
I think it's also, it comes back to something we've talked about quite a bit, and you also mentioned it around the communication channels, but it's also just being clear in your communication and not assuming, a certain level of understanding for people on your team, and ensuring that you're not the one perpetuating the chaos, right? Because, there are some leaders, and I worked for one of these who felt that they were actually much better wartime leader than they were regular leader. And so it kind of create the chaos, right? So that then they could flourish in those conditions. But I think the problem is that you tend to burn out your team in that case, right? And so being very clear in what your expectations are, as you said, around projects or what done looks like, being able to talk to the team and being honest. I think oftentimes as leaders, we say, oh, if there's too much or there's something that you can't get done, just tell me and I'll deprioritize it. But do we ever actually deprioritize anything?
I mean, no.
Have you ever seen something deprioritized? I feel like for me, it's always like, we'll do these 10 things. Okay, great. Well, there's actually 20 things. It was just like we kind of mushed them together to be 10 things. Yeah. So it seemed like more manageable.
Right.
And so that just creates chaos because it means that people don't understand what the priority is when everything is a priority.
Yeah. And I think that this really goes back to the ultimate leader in charge. And I think you said two different things that I want to tap on, but one is that a lot of startups and small business owners are started by people who have incredible ideas and extraordinary talent that do not necessarily know what it takes to do the thing or grow the business. And that's why we're here, right? We really want to make sure that you as the leader have those tools in your toolbox so that you can be successful in all the other things you're amazing at. So it's good to acknowledge that you have some needs. And that kind of leads me into the next part, which is that you are not a perfect person for all things. Mm-hmm. So that wartime leader is a great example. Sometimes you need someone that's like, you're going to shape up or ship out over here. Like, there is no ifs, ands, or buts. We're falling in line. We're doing this thing. We're going after this goal. We're going to get it together. But that's not appropriate in all scenarios. And sometimes you need someone that's outside of your organization to come in and help you address things. There's sort of like an old parable that talks about how the prophet isn't welcome in their hometown. And the idea of that is that sometimes it takes an outside perspective, not someone from inside, to help all the people that they know and trust that are all together with this shared purpose or place to actually see the thing that's trying to come to be. And so sometimes it's good to get another leader from another team, another department, maybe it's another business as a mentor, maybe it's a consultant, to come in and help you figure out, okay, our goal is to get off the chaos. How do we do it? What practically needs to be done, or what are actually the priorities, not just what I think are important?
Yeah, and I think it's so true because the person running the roller coaster at the amusement park is never riding it.
Right.
They're never like, they're always standing there, right? Pushing the button, giving the little thumbs up sign to the other people along the way, right? It's never just one person either, right? They're relying on input and data from other people to make sure that everybody's seatbelted in. And so there's relying on your team, your executive team. Like, is the team prepared for this? Do we have all of our checks in place that we're prepared to go into whatever, situation that we're going into? So is there a way, this is the $1 million question, right? To avoid the roller coaster of chaos altogether?
Yep. This is the $1 million question. So here's the thing. For our podcast being called Manage Chaos, it's taken us too long to talk about the chaos. I mean, there's like all the pieces of chaos, but let's hit it straight on. So first of all, what you should know, if you heard nothing else, is that you can't avoid it. It is unavoidable. Chaos is going to happen. It's going to be big. It's going to be small. It's just part of doing business. And so it's better to be prepared with a plan for what to do when chaos does come in order to be able to handle it when it's here. Mm-hmm. There was a company I worked with for a while. And ironically, I worked with multiple different crisis management agencies over the course of my career, in and out of different roles and companies. And one thing that was true of every single one that I worked with was that you couldn't avoid crisis, but you can always make a plan for what to do when that crisis occurs. And that is actually the more important part of crisis management. And so to effectively see what's going to happen from a business leader perspective, there's simple like processes you can do. And then there's also like high level planning you can do depending on what's good for you in this moment to make the plans to really prepare. So for example, a SWOT analysis, if you're going to start a new project or a new program or a new product, or maybe it's a new market, let's talk about the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the T word that I can't remember right now. What is it?
Threats.
Time?
Threats.
What is it?
Threats.
Threats. That's it. That's the one, because that's the crisis part. Yeah, and I couldn't remember what the T word was. Good job, Katrina. So think about those things and then make a plan for them, right? So maybe the threat is like somebody else will be more successful, which is a lame threat, by the way. But like maybe that's the threat. Great, you can't do anything about that. But at least you are aware that you could fail by simply just not being number one or not being enough in that market or whatever. So tools and processes like SWOT analyses are really good for your business to have as a regular practice. But then there's also things you can do from a really big level that feels like you maybe shouldn't be thinking about it as a business, but I think it's irresponsible to not consider it. And this is a good thing to do if you have a board or if you have a set of advisors. And that's going to be things like actual crisis planning. So what do we do if you're an all-in office workforce? What do we do if our entire electricity goes out? Or for some reason, we have to evacuate the office. Maybe there's something happening in the local area. Maybe there's another pandemic, heaven forbid. Maybe there's fill in the blank. So how do we mobilize our workers to make sure that they can continue to do their job outside of this physical location? Maybe it's a financial. Oh, go ahead.
Business continuity planning, right?
Business continuity planning.
I think that organizations that were able to more easily pivot as a result of the pandemic had those plans, right? And had practiced them and had, not necessarily a drill, but they had made sure their technology would work, right? That they could actually perform their job functions when they weren't in the office. And so many people, I think, don't want to plan for the rainy day because they just want to push it off and pretend like it's not going to happen.
Yeah, that was perfect. I was trying to avoid the business continuity word because I feel like a lot of startups think of it as too big, or even like that's like a corporate thing. But I'm glad you said it because it is what it's called. And if you're going to start researching how to do this, you do have to use that term, business continuity. So that's exactly it. And I would think of it like a scale. And so for people that are just listening instead of watching, I really am using my hands a lot in this episode, but there's like a linear like line, right? And so you can kind of be on anywhere that pendulum swings. You can be all the way over into the sort of minimum, which is doing these one-off SWOT analyses and things like that as things come up, all the way into we have a plan for what we really think is going to happen if something big to the business happens. And then there's, of course, tons of things in between. And I'd also say, don't try to eat the whole sandwich in one day, or however the phrase goes, right? Just take it one bite at a time. Maybe it's every quarter we need one more plan. Or maybe it's every maybe it's one day out of your leadership planning this year, we're going to just talk about how we get ahead of things. How do we make some of these like plans and how do we really be successful with that? So chaos is really tricky.
Yeah. And I think that the thing is, and there are people who can sort of thrive in chaos, right? And there's good chaos and bad chaos. And I think there's an element here, which we've kind of talked through, which is being able to sort of take that step back and try to figure out where is there additional chaos where maybe there doesn't need to be, where it's not healthy and it's not moving things in the right direction. And so, we really care, obviously, about this issue. It comes into the name of our podcast. So we're definitely putting together a free resource for you. It's going to be available for download on our website. And it's going to walk you through some of these exact things, right? So think of it kind of as a podcast, but delivered to you in a way that you can more easily reference when you have questions. And we're also going to add in there a chaos management plan where you can kind of take our advice and steps and make your own plan with your executive team so that you're ready for the next time your chaos needs to be managed. We will see you next time here on Managed Chaos Podcast.
This was another informative episode of Managed Chaos, the podcast for startups. You can find us on all of your favorite podcasting apps, as well as on Instagram and YouTube, where we are at Managed Chaos Podcast. For additional resources or to continue the conversation, you can find Katrina Purcell and Rachel Anderson on LinkedIn.